And welcome to another AFIVA interview analysis. My name is Paul Olele, and I'm here with you on this lovely day. We're going to be discussing about a B2B wholesale platform that helps to connect buyers with sellers. The name of the organization, the company, is Powered by the People, or simply better yet known as PBP. And with me, I do have Hedvig Alexander. She's the VP of Community and Impact Plus. She's one of the founders too of co-founders of the startup organization, and it helps to connect a lot of makers, local makers with sellers, not only on the African continent, but also in North America, in Asia, in Europe. It is a digital marketplace for buyers and makers to conduct business. And they've also provided them with tools and access to financing. Hedvig, welcome to the show. And I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
You do. Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Paul.
So let's talk about the beginning. How did the concept of this startup come into fruition? Because I do understand you're one of the founders. You have other founders too, Ella Pianovich and Alison Phillips.
Alison Phillips, yes, that's right.
Yeah. So how did this concept come into place, and what aided to pretty much the rise of PBP?
Yeah, so I mean, Ella and I both had businesses in this area, sort of small batch handmade producers. Ella ran one out of Kenya, and I ran one out of Toronto, Canada, working with those producers and small brands all over the world. But we felt that there was something missing in our brands. It really is sort of this troika of access to markets, access to financing, and access to digital tools. And if you kind of miss one of those three, it's hard to make things work. And so we felt there was a limit to the growth of the businesses we had previously, because they were set up in a smaller way and couldn't facilitate all this for the makers we had. And so we'd been talking, we sort of became, well, I guess we were competitors initially, but we sort of really bonded over the limitations of the businesses we were in, and really felt that it was all about, a bigger pie that would benefit everybody. And so we could have left the competition aside and sort of spent a year's time trying to talk about what this should really look like. And then Alison, our third co-founder, is an industrial designer, has worked in fashion and for BlackBerry here in Toronto. She had been doing some design work for me. I was one of her many clients. And so she was really interested in this too. And so she sort of joined from that side. So we sort of have Ella, who is not an engineer, but is a systems designer and, from MIT, and has a real understanding of tech. Me, who has spent all my time kind of on the supply side of makers, small businesses all over the world. That's kind of my background, mostly in economic development. And then Alison, who really sort of understand the brand and design side, that we sort of thought that between us, we had the skills to set up sort of this larger platform. And at that time, it wasn't so clear, but platforms were beginning to be B2B platforms, which hadn't really been something. But of course, also because of COVID, where trade shows were less possible, wholesale platforms were becoming more and more in fashion. And so we didn't really think about that when we set it up. We felt this was necessary, but I think part of our success came also with the kind of funding that was possible, because investors suddenly looked at B2B platforms in a much more favorable way. And even though there were certain risks associated with our platform, because many of the brands and the makers we have on the supply side, have issues that a brand or a maker in North America or Europe wouldn't have, because they've had more access to digital tools, more access to payments, more access to education. We benefited from this trend. And we occupy a very unique sort of smaller segment in this bigger, larger wholesale story, but one that's our segment is growing bigger than other parts of retail. So a very lucrative, opportunity that hasn't been assessed before.
So thank you for that. So I know you guys do operate internationally, and you were open. You started in 2019, I believe. You operate internationally, but for the focus, let's shift to the African continent. You guys are you have a base. So I don't know if that's the official base, but you're in Nairobi. That's one of your many locations. So
That's right.
how have you been able to assist African makers, and what specific African makers have actually benefited from your platform?
Yeah, we have we work on most continents, but because Ella, our CEO is located in Nairobi, and we have a quite large team with her, a tech team and a data team. We of course have a lot of knowledge of suppliers and producers and brands in Nairobi and larger Africa. And then we have Toronto, where we are partly a Canadian business. And so I'm here with a team of a similar size. And so in Africa, I think we have about 200 African businesses on our platform today. And many of them have done really well. We've been able to link them up to not only sort of small buyers across North America, but also to really large businesses like, Banana Republic, West Elm, Williams-Sonoma, Pottery Barn, all now carry products by African brands and producers because we've been able to put them there. So really what we're trying to do is we're trying to remove the friction on both sides of the platform. We have obviously two users. We have the supply side, the makers, as we call them, and we have the buyers, and they are being kept apart by a number of different friction points, and those are really the ones that the platform are trying to solve. And of course, on the maker side, it's things like being digital, having an attractive digital identity and profile. It's low-cost payments. It's aggregated shipping models. On the buyer side, it's just easy access and discovery to a whole new world of brands and makers and producers, and being able to pay into a US bank account and having a lot of supervision in the whole sort of supply chain. That's important for them. So, yeah.
So recently, PBP they had a 13.6 million. They've raised $13.6 million to scale global presence and retail technology. So focusing really on technology, what has been, I put it like this, is there sort of an app where you have sellers or buyers who can get on the app to pretty much, source out, okay, this is the maker, I like their product, I want to get this for this specific price? Is there an easier way to facilitate those type of transactions?
Yeah, so we don't have an app as such, but for example, if you go onto our website, a buyer can set up a profile with their buyer ID, because it's a business-to-business platform. So we need to make sure that at this point we can't have consumers shop on the site because it's wholesale selling, which is wholesale pricing, which is obviously lower. And so a buyer sets up the profile, and once he or she has logged in, they have access to all our almost 1,000 makers and brands on the website. If they require support, let's say they're looking for sheets or towels or certain kind of pillows, they can speak to our team on the website and say, I would love your support in finding this and this and this. So we have a bit of what we call a concierge team that helps buyers navigate the site and find the products that they're looking for. On the maker side, we have a maker portal, we call it at the moment, and that's where a maker can sign up, do a due diligence. We do test makers a little bit before they come on site, because we have to make sure that there are certain sustainability and verification questions that we do need to have covered before we bring people on board. And then we also need to make sure that business is ready for business and can deal with an international buyer. And
it's interesting you actually, sorry to cut you off. It's interesting you brought up that, registration, because I did look on the website that there was, how for makers to register online. What is the acceptance rate for makers who opt in for, and this is one of your products, PBP cash flow? What's the acceptance rate for that?
For the cash flow?
Yeah, and can you also give us a brief overview
Yeah,
of?
yeah, I would say for businesses that apply to get on our platform, and the number goes up and down by a weekly basis, but I would say our acceptance rate is probably a little bit less than 50%. And again, of the business that are clear to get financing for orders that are on the marketplace, any order on the marketplace, we finance. So we will give a maker an advance payment if they want for any order that's made on the marketplace. We sometimes also do a little bit of financing of orders that are by a maker that's on our marketplace, but the order maybe didn't come through the marketplace, like a bigger order. And so we can finance these bigger orders. They're often bigger than $100,000, and we require a little bit more information about the maker and the buyer, most notably, because the way it works is that, let's say somebody places a $5,000 order and the maker would like a $2,500 advance. We give the maker that advance, and then the buyer pays us, and we minus what the maker got in advance and give them the rest of the amount. So we don't make collections on the buyer. So really, we finance the maker's ability to produce on time, which is why we have this due diligence, because we want to make sure that the makers and the brands and the producers can produce quality product and deliver it on time. And then we verify the maker's ability to pay. And so that's putting it a little bit on the head, because often most makers out somewhere outside North America, Europe, has a real hard time getting access to any kind of financing, and including purchase order financing, which is what we give, because banks and other finance institutions want to go in and assess lots of things around the business. We don't really do that. We look at their ability to produce and the buyer's ability to pay, which has made it much easier for us to finance people.
So let's shift gears to the buyer side, because you guys have products for not only the makers, but also the buyers as well. So on the buyers, you have PBP FlexPay, which allows buyers and access to $1,500 credit line. What are the, I say, perks or the benefits of this product, and how does it really differ from just regular payment of a product?
Yeah, I mean, where the advance payment, I mean, it's almost like FlexPay has two sides to it. There's the advance payment to the maker, and then what the FlexPay that you're talking about, the 1,500, is a credit for the buyer. So we've I would only say at the moment only 20% of buyers qualify for this kind of credit, because it's really important to make sure that the buyer can actually pay you at the end. And so many the opportunity for the buyer is that they can get this 1,500 FlexPay, and they can then only pay it back 60 days after they have received the order, which means that it gives the buyer an opportunity to sell through the products before he or she has to pay, which is quite well known in retail. Not just our platform, but most of the business-to-business platforms have been a very effective way to help buyers run their cash flow. So we've really been trying to help both buyers and makers run their cash flow. I would say that the FlexPay on the buyer side has been a little bit more difficult than the maker, probably because we know more about the makers than we tend to know about the buyer.
And any up and coming products from PBP that we should be expecting that can sort of revolutionize this fascinating relationship with buyers and sellers from all across the globe? Is there any new products that
I mean, I think in an ideal world, now we're going into a recession, I think with several banks having had trouble, I think officially now the environment is unfortunately changing. I mean, it has been 5 years with steady growth, so I guess these things have to come, and so I think we have to also accordingly plan probably a little bit differently. But in an ideal world, with enough cash and to fund everything you would like, I think really what we would like to build is kind of turn our maker portal, where at the moment all the makers using it for is really to go on, set up their digital identity and their profile, and they can then sell on the market and ask for advance payments. But really, how can we turn that into almost like a maker operating system that can really run much more of the maker's business. There can maybe with time be inventory management, there can be accounting, there can be lots of invoicing, lots of other tools embedded in this that can really help a maker run their business unpowered by people and connect to other platforms as well. Because what we see in the wholesale space, most of really everybody but us are mostly focused on supporting makers and brands and vendors in more developed markets, so North America, Europe, Australia, where we really are focused on makers in the rest of the world. But what we want to see is a whole new segment of makers anywhere in the world, Asia, India, part of Asia, Latin America, Africa, have an opportunity to play in the marketplace. We want a more equal access to market for any kind of business. And of course, that requires, a heavier lift, because many of these businesses have had all kinds of disadvantages, I'm sure you can imagine, from access to education to access to digital tools. I mean, most of our makers don't have a credit card. How can you sign up to any of the digital tools any of us use today without having a credit card? That's how we pay for these things. So the makers out there who produce really beautiful things and who are very good at what they do is at a massive disadvantage. I mean, if you want a Shopify account, for example, to set up your direct-to-consumer website, you can't do that without a credit card. So we are really trying to develop products and opportunities that don't exclude makers because they don't have a certain registration, because they don't have a certain bank, because they don't have a certain credit card. We are trying to develop products and services that doesn't require these mainstream products that, let's face it, really only quite developed markets have these days. I mean, PayPal doesn't even exist in most middle-income countries. And so, even in terms of payments, the banking system is the only system that really, truly covers the entire world. Otherwise, Stripe, PayPal, Wise has sort of covers different parts of the world. And so if you want to give everybody access, then you need to find new ways of doing these things. And it's really hard. But the impact associated with doing that and the access, for people generally is enormous. And I would say that, amongst all the compelling value propositions of startups out there, really very few cover completely new land and are really creating a whole new level of value for a whole new host of people. And we want to be that business.
Yes, rightfully so. In terms of expansion, we mentioned Nairobi. Do you guys plan on, I know you guys are available in other parts of the globe, but do you also plan on expanding to other corners of Africa as well? Because you're situated in East Africa, any chance of maybe expanding into a Lagos or Accra, Johannesburg? These are also big hubs on the continent. So is there any plan in the pipeline, pretty much of setting up a shop or a base out there in these
I think at the moment we have makers and vendors from all these geographies, but we don't have an office as such. And I don't think we will have anytime soon, just because I think that we obviously have a very distributed team. And on top of that, obviously dealing with a lot of different time zones. And it's complicated. And so we are trying at the moment to focus a little bit by having our Kenyan East African hub, because Ella is there and she can sort of support the team there. And then our Toronto hub, where I am with Alison, where we can really support the team here and not have too many satellites. I think, as the business grows and stabilizes, you could look at these things, but I don't think it's something we would be doing the next year.
So pretty much actually, I wanted to circle back. In terms of the makers, do you have any well-known off the top of your head that have benefited from the platform, or it's not something that you have access to?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have so many. Are you talking about African makers?
Yeah, the local African makers.
Yeah, let me just. We have a great company that does pottery out of Tunisia. Obviously, that's not sub-Saharan Africa, but have done extremely well. We have cotton tree out of South Africa that's done incredibly well. We have a couple of makers out of Morocco, Alcantara Frederick, that's done extremely well. We have Lulu Kitululu Studio. It's an art studio that does sort of original but affordable art out of Nairobi that's done extremely well. We have, let's see what else I'm looking at here. Siafu Home, a textile company out of Nairobi that's done really well. We've done something called Woven Worldwide out of Ghana, really beautiful baskets done extremely well. We have something called Hadith Craft out of Kenya that's done really well. We have collaborative craft projects out of Zimbabwe that's done really well, and we've managed to sort of get most of these makers into really bigger and smaller retailers. So, I mean, I think Africa is really, I mean, the continent have an incredible amount of beautiful, authentic products. I think the challenge that we are solving, particularly for Africa, is payments. How do we pay the makers in a way that doesn't take too much of the profit out of it? And shipping. Many of the people are really interested in storage. So, of course, African baskets, and nobody really makes baskets like Africa, but of course, they're also hard to ship, right? Because they're bulky and they cost a lot of money. And so we're trying to really work with aggregated shipping models where we can aggregate a lot of shipments, and buyers don't get them as fast. But often in retail, buyers, I mean, if the consumer, you're eager to get your product really fast, buyers often have certain buying seasons. And so I find that lead times can vary, and that gives this kind of opportunity for shipping quite differently and more aggregated. So we really have several handfuls of really strong makers on the continent. And I think if we can solve some of these payment logistical problems, Africa could take off in a whole new way. I mean, there were just some obstacles associated with the African market. That's hard because, for example, India is also far away, but India has a lot of manufacturing going on anyway, also large factories. And so logistics routes out of India are slightly more frequent and a little bit less expensive. Not the same for Africa, because there isn't a whole amount of manufacturing in Africa, I mean, outside our sector.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, in terms of growth, where do you see PBP in the next decade? What's the goal for Powered by the People? Powered by People.
Yeah, Powered by People. Yeah, I hope we become a really large, thriving B2B marketplace that's really focusing on the rest of the world. So we are not necessarily, we are including anybody, but we are really focusing on solving the problems of makers and producers and brands outside major economic centers in Europe, North America, and Australia, because everybody else is focusing on those. And that's, the challenge is where we are. That's really where people need solutions. And so really hope to have enormous growth and really be able to add a whole new level of retail suppliers to the global retail market. And that really means solving a lot of problems on the maker side, from, really being able to build out this maker operating system that isn't just a back end, but really can solve most of the business issues a maker might have, from payments to shipping to accounting to payroll to anything you do solve specifically for this type of business. And then also at the same time, get buyers on board and make sure they feel comfortable buying from us, really feeling that we solve this discovery of products and producers they haven't seen before, and we make it sufficiently easy for them to buy from this whole new segment of producers.
Yes. Hedvig Alexander, thank you so much for giving us an insight into what this company is doing, really helping to bridge the gap with buyers and sellers, not only just in Africa, but also across the globe. Viewers, make sure you visit them on their website, poweredbypeople.com. They're also on several platforms: LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So you can get to know more about them and get to know more about their services. My name is Paul Olele. I'm your host for FIVA, and we'll see you on the next video. Thank you for watching.